Death in the Dormitory, Target Practice Mini Mystery. Written by Nikki Haverstock. Narrated by the author. Chapter 1. The map app on my phone alerted me that my exit was 1 mile ahead. I turned on my blinker and pulled into the right lane to exit the freeway. The change in acceleration woke up Moo, my Great Dane, who was sleeping in the back seat. He sat up and stuck his head between the 2 bucket seats at the front of the van I was driving. All the farther back rows had been removed so that bow cases and luggage could be stacked up. Moo whined in my ear, and at the red light, I turned to scratch behind his ears. "Easy, we're almost there. They said that the college is only a few miles down this road, and the dorm we are staying at is right on the corner." I checked the time and did some math based on the last text I had received from Mary. I had made a potty stop for both Moo and me when she updated me on their location. She had felt badly that I was driving all alone, but I assured her that Moo was all the company I needed. What I didn't say was that I would rather ride on the roof than in her passenger van with the rest of the archery team from her college. They were loud and best described as enthusiastic beyond measure for their first away tournament. Mary was the team captain and very proud of the progress they had made in such a short time. Many had never held a bow 6 months earlier. I was proud of them too, but found that my tolerance quickly eroded when I was in a confined space with them for too long. Even Moo found them a lot, though he loved the ear scratches and the food they snuck him despite my ongoing reminders that human food was bad for him. They had finally bought a box of tiny dog treats, and I pretended not to notice. It seemed like a fair trade. From what I had been told, we were one of only 2 teams arriving early, with the rest of the competition arriving in the afternoon tomorrow before practice started. I stifled a yawn and turned down the radio so I could squint into the distance to find the empty dorm in which we were going to stay. The tournament organizers had warned me that the directions would likely take me to the back of the building. I followed the road and noticed that despite it not being too late, the campus was emptier than anything I experienced back in my collegiate days. I had heard that this particular university's schedule was unusual, and this weekend fell after finals week was over and well before summer school started, but I hadn't expected it to be so quiet. I came upon a brightly lit building, and despite my phone insisting I pull around to the left of the building, I dutifully went around the right. I leaped from the van. Moo clawed his way over the center console to exit through my door and bolted for the bushes lining the outside of the building. I dove back into the car to grab his leash and my phone. By the time I snapped the leash onto his collar, he had already watered several of the shrubs around the exterior. I realized that I had, despite my best attempts, still parked at the back of the building. At least there were lots of empty parking spots, and the fresh night air felt good after so many hours of driving. We followed the landscaping around the side of the building and were approaching the front corner when I heard voices. A large conifer of some variety blocked most of my view, but through the branches, under the streetlight, I could see and hear a group of 4 archers in their competition uniforms. It was unlikely they could see me, though, as my side of the building was cloaked in darkness. A boy in a black beanie, who was clearly worked up, shouted, "I could just kill him!" The group hushed him and looked around to see if anyone had heard. I pulled Moo closer to me as goosebumps rose on my arms. I was glad to have my black and white guardian with me, and once again silently thanked the school for allowing me to bring him under the guise of being a team mascot. I stepped in closer to the tree, hoping to eavesdrop. Who wouldn't be nosy after overhearing that? After they reassured themselves that they were alone, the girl with wire-rimmed glasses continued. "Maybe this will be his last year. Then we can hire a new coach." A boy in a cowboy hat, who looked almost too young to be attending college, was shaking his head. "No, I already spoke to the rec department, and they said he is staying as long as he wants. It's not fair. He's driving away anyone that's interested, and gives us a bedtime." He fidgeted with his hat, pushing it back on his head, then tugging it forward again. He grabbed it by the crown, careful not to distort the brim. He was probably from some place where he had been taught to take care of his hat. A different gal pulled her face into a grimace, the row of braces in her mouth catching the minimal lighting. "Oh, come on, I think you guys are overreacting." Glasses glared at her, or at least I assumed she was glaring from the way her eyebrows knit, since I couldn't see her eyes because of the flash of reflection on the lenses. "You're his favorite, the coach's pet, and team captain. He lets you get away with everything, and this is your last year. Then you get to go run your own program." In a faint voice that I strained to catch, Braces replied, "I don't want to go away." Cowboy put a bolstering arm around her shoulder and practically lifted her off the ground in his attempt to comfort her. "Oh, don't you worry about leaving. It's natural. It's me you need to worry about. I'm stuck here for a few more years." He leaned over and kissed her on the right side of the head, and even in the dim light I could see a blush color her entire face pink. Beanie, who was pacing and might have missed the conversation, stopped and stared at them. "I think I have an idea. What if he just got sick this weekend? If he wasn't breathing down my neck all weekend, then I really think I could get the scores I need to. Then I know I can get onto the international team. If I can win a medal there, I'll be a shoo-in to get a position at one of the training centers." I was so caught up in the conversation that I didn't notice Moo. Only too late did I see him rock back, then propel himself forward, pulling the leash out of my hand. He jetted away from the building and across the lawn, doing donuts so fast that his heavy claws tore chunks out of the grass and flung them in every direction. It wasn't uncommon for Moo to have the zoomies, a term I had learned on the internet that describes certain breeds' tendency to get bursts of energy. But I certainly hadn't expected him to have an episode right at that moment, and found that I was rooted in place longer than I should have been. Eventually, I raced after him, calling his name. "Wait, Moo, get back here!" I wasn't sure how to hide the fact that I had been listening to the group only a few feet away, so I pretended to spot them and acted shocked. "Oh, hi! Don't worry about him. We've been stuck in the car for a while and he got away from me when I opened the door." Braces and Cowboy broke into big smiles, but Beanie and Glasses seemed suspicious. Glasses looked me over. "Where did you park? I didn't see you drive up." I shrugged and managed to snag Moo's leash as he raced up to me, didn't quite stop in time, and slid into my side. "Oof! I parked on the other side but didn't see a door." She nodded slowly. "That's the back. This is the front. It's confusing. If you go through there, one of the students here can check you in." I pulled on an overly cheery face and smiled back. "Thanks. I guess I better get our room keys." "Where's the rest of your team?" Cowboy asked. "They should be here any minute." I smiled, and the awkwardness of the situation did me in. Between the long drive and almost losing Moo, I was no longer interested in whatever team drama they had going on. I grabbed the front door and gave a last, "See you tomorrow," over my shoulder before going inside. Chapter 2. The next morning, I dressed in the clothes I had laid out the night before, slipped the leash onto Moo, and threw my backpack over my shoulder. Unfortunately, the team van had blown a tire, and Mary and her teammates and coach hadn't arrived until so late that it was practically morning. They would likely sleep until early afternoon. I carefully closed the door behind me and made a trip to the girls' communal bathroom, then outside for Moo's turn. I was at loose ends until someone woke up and figured I might as well get some work out of the way and grab breakfast. Though the campus was empty, the staff had opened the cafeteria on the ground floor of the dorm, but the options were going to be pretty limited. I found the cafeteria and poked a head in first. It reminded me of a cafeteria I would have used back when I was in college, though clearly it was designed to serve a lot more people than mine had been. The buffet-style salad bar, the soup bar, and all the other bars were empty and dark. But the lights were on, several tables had food on them, and the door to the kitchen was open. The sudden crash of metal equipment, followed by muttered curses, indicated that someone was present in the back. I put down the door stopper and hooked Moo's leash around the door handle. I gave it a few tugs to check that it was secure, as a loose Moo could clear those tables in no time flat. I had fed him on the lawn in front of the van I had driven, but dogs always had a second stomach for free food, especially human food. He looked up at me and whined. I petted him on the head and reminded myself that he was the ideal weight, and no matter what he tried to tell me, he was not starving to death. I must have softened a little because he let out a little whimper and licked his lip and shuffled his paws. The light clicking of his nails reminded me of a tap-dancing mouse. "No," I said in my softest but firmest voice. He let out a sigh and slunk to the ground, his head resting on his front paws, though his eyes followed me in case I relented. I was sure Moo wasn't supposed to even be at the entrance, so I tiptoed in, determined to grab some food and sneak out before I was caught. I spied a tray of donuts beautifully arranged in circles, like a target, and ring of sugar glazed, another ring of chocolate delight, and a final unidentified ring of brown donuts with a darker glaze. One donut was missing from the outer ring. Fruit, granola, and other healthy snacks were also available, but my stomach grumbled loudly. I'd managed to avoid processed food and sugar for months. Certainly I could continue, but Moo was back to standing and staring at me. His large tail was thumping against the door, and his whines transformed into medium-volume grunts. He licked his lips, and I could guess that we were seconds away from him yanking the leash free, so I grabbed one of the unlabeled donuts, hoping that whoever had gotten there ahead of me had great taste. I grabbed a napkin, and in my haste I knocked the whole pile on the ground. When I leaned over to grab them, I saw that they had landed on the crown of a cowboy hat that was sitting on its brim. I picked up the pile of napkins as Moo barked again and bounced high enough that his leash slipped off the door handle. He raced across the cafeteria floor, knocking me out of the way with a single bark of joy. I heard a woman from the kitchen yelp, "Is that a dog?" He slammed into the table, which was sturdier than it looked, because instead of crashing to the ground in a flood of donuts, it just bobbled and sent 3 glazed ones rolling across the floor. Luckily for everyone else who wanted to eat that morning, Moo prioritized the runaway pastries and snatched them up like a black and white version of Hungry, Hungry Hippos. I grabbed a fistful of donuts off the table with one hand and Moo's leash with the other hand. It was clear I wouldn't be able to return until Moo was safely locked away. With my cache of forbidden fare, I ran to the entrance and hit the hallway at a flat-out run. I expected to hear the door slam open behind me and someone yell that I had been caught, but by the time I hit the door to the exterior, it appeared that Moo and I were in the clear. I hadn't been paying attention to the direction I was headed, so it took me a moment to recognize the Westmount Training Center van that I had parked the previous night. It was still full of archery equipment. Normally, I would never leave bow cases in the van, but I had figured that I would unload when everyone else arrived, never imagining they would be so late. I went around, mouthful of brown donut, and checked the doors. They were all locked, and I set an alarm on my phone. The outdoor temperature was still cool, but if it got high enough, there was a risk that the bow limbs could delaminate in the closed van. I didn't want to have to unload all the gear myself, but if the only options were that, letting the limbs explode, or waking the team after a rough night, then I would do it myself. I could check back in a few hours, and at the least I could crank on the air conditioning and wait inside. I stuffed the rest of the donut into my mouth and decided that the flavor was peanut butter and chocolate. My skin was practically buzzing from the extra sugar hitting my bloodstream like a freight train. I tripped over something in the grass and fumbled my grasp on the other donuts. Several fell out of my hand but didn't hit the ground, as Moo snapped them out of the air faster than I'd ever seen him move before. He appeared to swallow them whole, then lick his chops to get all the bits of glittering sugar from his fur before flopping down onto the grass with a grunt. His eyes rolled back in bliss and his stomach larger than I remembered it. I opened my mouth to chastise him, but gave up. If I could cheat on my healthy eating plan, who was I to blame Moo for doing the same? I probably didn't eat all those donuts, and he had managed to grab the ones that didn't contain chocolate, which would have concerned me a bit. I started to walk around the building to the front, which reminded me of the previous night and the intriguing conversation. Was it possible to be around archery without drama being far behind? Hurt feelings and competitive natures brought every conflict, no matter how small, into stark relief. I had seen that in college, but returning to the sport almost a decade later, I could see drama in every aspect of it, from the recreational league I assisted with to high-level training camps for international archery celebrities. Nothing ever ran smoothly, but maybe that was part of the fun. It was always exciting. As I approached the tree I had hidden behind, two things caught my attention in rapid order. First was the glint of metal in the grass. I realized the glare came from a set of keys covered in dew. I reached down to grab them when suddenly a stench caught my nose, and I recoiled, realizing that dew wasn't the only thing covering the keys. The key ring was attached to a lanyard, the kind usually worn around the neck, and sitting on top of it was a lumpy brown gift from Moo. After picking up Moo bombs several times a day for almost 6 months, I was far too acquainted with the shape, size, and even scent of his droppings. I was always careful to collect and dispose of his refuse, but I must have been so engrossed in the conversation that I missed one of his deposits the previous night. That would explain the sudden burst of energy that had blown my cover. I pulled out one of the plastic bags, which I was never without, from my pocket and tried to pick up the mess. But after the night out in the overgrown grass, the lanyard was still befouled after my attempt to tidy it up. I was just glad I had spotted it before I grabbed the keys to turn them in and flung the mess everywhere. After I knotted the plastic bag, I grabbed the clean section of the lanyard and held it away from my body. I would need to rinse it off before I turned it in. Hopefully, whoever had lost it already had a second set of keys to use. Possibly the keys belonged to a student who had already moved home for the summer and would be happy to receive a refund on their lost keys when I turned them in, but that would need to wait. I disposed of Moo's mess and laid the keys under a bush by the front door. I could grab a wet paper towel from the bathroom and hopefully clean off the plastic lanyard well enough. Our host would be setting up the range in a few hours, and I could walk it over to them. I was about to close the door when a female voice called out behind me, "Hold the door!" Braces, from the night before, came jogging up from behind her school van. "Thanks, I just got back." She gave me a smile and scooted through the door ahead of me. "I ran out to get some coffee and was just sitting in the van. This is the dog from last night, right? I can't imagine there's another." She laughed quite loudly in the quiet hallway as we walked. I guessed that she could have benefited quite a bit from cutting back on the caffeine, considering how wired she seemed. "Oh, nice," I countered with little to add. "Do you happen to know where the study lounge is? My roommate is probably still sleeping, and I wanted to get some homework done." She patted the messenger bag slung over her shoulder. "Actually, I was going to look for that as well. No rest for the wicked, eh?" I lifted my backpack to show that I also had work to do. "I think they said it was down the hall from the cafeteria, so..." I searched the hall. Once I had my bearings, I marched toward the back exit and turned right at the open door. "This appears to be it. If I drop my bag, can you watch?" I cut off suddenly, and braces slammed into my back. A man lay under a window flat on his back, his eyes staring and his face purple. Chapter 3. Braces shoved past me. "Call 911!" She dropped to her knees, both fists knotted in his shirt as she shook him. "Coach, can you hear me? Coach!" The paramedics came so quickly that I wasn't able to do much more than call for help before they took over. Braces, frantic, was screaming and crying, more of a hindrance than a help. I had called 911 and conveyed what I could to dispatch. There was no blood or signs of struggle. Though he was purple and unresponsive, he was not cold or beyond help. I had felt a bit ill and gone outside to sit on the curb while speaking to the dispatch operator. Since I wasn't sure of the building's exact location on campus, I waved at the paramedics to catch their attention when they came to roughly the right area. I kept Moo far away from the activity and watched solemnly as the EMTs rushed to the coach to the ambulance and took off, sirens and lights on high. That was a good sign, and I sent up a prayer for him. I watched as the ambulance disappeared from sight and waited until the siren was just an echo in my ears, but I still struggled to move. My heart still pounded in my chest, and from my previous experiences, I knew that the adrenaline dump I was currently experiencing would leave me lightheaded and confused until it stopped. Then I would be exhausted, and still confused, because I was certain something nefarious had led to that coach lying on the carpet. I closed my eyes and tried to remember everything I had seen before and after seeing the man. The room had been decorated as a sort of sitting room. Sturdy chairs, large enough to fit a variety of builds, were scattered in singles and clusters. Mass-produced coffee tables and end tables also dotted the floor. I could imagine study groups meeting and solo students curling up to read in them. But other than that, I couldn't seem to remember much. I had walked into the room and not immediately noticed the prone figure until Braces shouted at me to call for help. She had run to his side. I tried to narrow my focus and dredge up something that I might later find useful, and eventually something came to mind. When I had dialed 911, before I left the room, I had an image of Braces leaning over and shaking her coach, her knee resting on a small brown paper bag. I had no memory of her carrying it, so it must have been with him when we had arrived. I hadn't seen a backpack or messenger bag, no empty coffee cups or weapons. In fact, perhaps I was jumping the gun. Maybe he had had a heart attack as the result of genetics or even poor dietary habits. The donuts in my stomach flip-flopped a few times, and I regretted my moment of weakened self-control. A moment on the lips and a lifetime in the cardiovascular system. Sure, his archers had been talking about getting rid of him, but no one had mentioned murder. And who hadn't, in a moment of frustration, declared that they wanted to get rid of someone, when really all they meant was that the person should move away and never be seen again. And it wasn't as if he had been shot or stabbed. Fortunate as it was, we would all die someday, and though I had seen a lot more murders than I ever dreamed in my worst nightmares, it didn't mean that every dead body was the result of wrongdoing. Moo nuzzled my hand and I opened my eyes. I felt clear-headed and realized I should check on Braces. I went back to the lounge, but Braces was no longer alone. Beanie, Glasses, and Cowboy were standing with her, clustered together and talking quietly. It took me a moment to recognize Cowboy without his hat, and for a second I had assumed he was someone I hadn't seen before. But then I noticed his boots and they jolted my memory enough to recognize his face. I stood in the doorway, not wanting to intrude on their grief. I scanned the ground for the paper bag I had seen, but it was gone. Brace's face was bright red and wet with tears. Cowboy had an arm around her, attempting to comfort her. Glasses and Beanie were ashen and seemed to be in shock. Glasses was mostly turned away from me, and though she was trying to be quiet, her hysterical tone carried to me in the stillness of the morning. "Who did this? It is just too much of a coincidence that last night you guys were all complaining about him, and this morning he's dead." Cowboy sighed, then spoke in his slow drawl. "Oh, get off it. We've been complaining for years. It was just bad timing, and I feel awful about what I said last night." With a slightly clogged nose, Braces added, "And if someone did kill him, it's not like they would just blurt it out." Beanie shook his head, though he stared at the ground, looking slightly sick. "Who will coach me?" Braces crouched to get into Beanie's line of sight and spoke directly to him. "I will if you need me to, but you'll be fine. Where were you this morning?" Beanie and Glasses exchanged a look before he replied, gesturing as he spoke. "We were just working on our equipment." I could hear the eye roll in Cowboy's voice as he countered. "Right. While all the equipment was locked up in the van. Is now really the time to lie about what we all already know?" Braces sniffled. "Know what?" Cowboy faced her. "That they're banging. Come on. I've been politely trying to ignore it, but they are hardly discreet. He got a text earlier and from a dead sleep, sat up, declared that he was done sleeping and disappeared from the room. Then you were in the room alone? Braces asked Cowboy. Yeah, I slept in, but so were the rest of you. Cowboy gestured at Glasses, Beanies, and Braces. Glasses interjected. Wait, I didn't text you. She pulled out her phone. That's weird. I didn't send that. Beanie rustled in his pockets. Of course you did. Look. See, it's right there. I got that and raced over. Glasses interrupted, her voice unnaturally high and tense. You say come over, but no one knows. Same for everyone. You could have gone away. Braces spoke up. I don't know what you guys did, but I had no part of it. This morning I took the van and went to get some coffee. Real coffee. Besides, you are way ahead of yourself. Coach might be okay. I mean... She cut herself off with a sob before continuing. I'm going to call the hospital to see if I can find out anything. She started to leave, but pulled up when she saw me at the door. I stepped into the room. Sorry to interrupt, but I wanted to help. I'm here as an assistant coach for the Wyoming team, but they're still sleeping, so I'm free if you need anything. Braces gave me a tight smile that still showed her braces, which had decorative neon yellow elastics that were like giant arrows to any stray bits of food. But hers were so perfect, one would think she had come directly from the orthodontist. She walked around me into the hallway. I don't need anything, but maybe they do. Chapter 4. Glasses and Beanie also gave me tight smiles and followed Braces out, but turned toward the back exit and went outside to the same place from where I had watched the ambulance leave. Cowboy flopped onto the couch and ran his hands through his hair. The close-knit group of 4 was gone, and it was now everyone for themselves, it appeared. He didn't exactly ask for help, but I went ahead and took a seat near him. We introduced ourselves, and no sooner had his name gone into my ear than it escaped my brain. I refused to give up the nicknames I had given them when my brain was already so full of information. My gut said that something wasn't adding up, and too much had already happened and been overheard for me to just pretend it was an accident. I'm really sorry to hear about your coach, I said, hoping to broach the subject. I tried to radiate the air of a caring aunt whom he would want to tell all his troubles to. Moo stepped forward and put his enormous head on Cowboy's knee. Moo had a great sense of who was open to doggy attention, and Cowboy couldn't resist the urge to run a hand over Moo's head and shoulders. Big dog you got here. Does he eat a lot? He'd eat a lot more if I let him. His ideal shape would be a sphere if he had any say in it. I gave a chuckle, but resisted the urge to fill the silence, instead waiting for Cowboy to feel the pressure. Cowboy set to scratching behind Moo's ears. His fingers danced over the fur until he found the exact spot he was looking for. Moo's back leg on that side started twitching, then went into full kicks as though he were desperately trying to start a motorcycle. Once he was done, Cowboy patted Moo on the head as a reward for his performance. I can't believe it. Do you think Coach will be okay? I'm sorry. I don't know, but the paramedics got here really quickly, so that's a good sign. He nodded. I came downstairs just as they were leaving. Did you hear the ambulance? That was what woke me up. I can sleep till noon if they let me, but usually my roommate wakes me up with his clanking around. I just threw on boots and raced downstairs as fast as I could, but I wasn't quick enough. I couldn't even find my hat. By the time I got to the room, they were already leaving. Did you hear the text that your room got? Maybe. I remember him leaving and can't specifically remember hearing the text notification. I pretty much figured out what was happening. She's supposed to have some boyfriend back home, but they've been sneaking around forever. Please excuse me. I need to grab some food. He stood up and headed for the door, not completely turning his back on me, but making it clear he was leaving. I stood up quickly and raced to follow. I could probably squeeze in a few more questions, but I had only gone a few steps when I made an involuntary whimper. Little black dots danced across my vision, and I reached my hand out, finding Moo next to me. He pressed into my side and kept me from hitting the ground as I stumbled. I hadn't gotten my normal sleep the previous night, since I had gone to bed late and awakened early. On top of that, I hadn't drunk much liquid the previous day during the drive for fear of requiring a pit stop every 30 minutes, not to mention the sugar rush and the adrenaline rush leaving me. Of course, that all crashed through my mind in a tangle of words and knots around my brain before coming out of my mouth as a "arf." My vision was almost completely black when a hand caught me under the arm. "Easy there. You are awfully pale," Cowboy said from somewhere off to my left. He guided me back to the chair and helped lower me to the seat. I was able to relax as my vision and brain power slowly returned. I felt both hot and cold at the same time. Also fidgety and weak, both a little nauseated and starving. Sorry, I muttered. Moo pranced next to me, barking 3 times, which I felt was the dog equivalent of splashing cold water on my face. And it worked. My spine straightened, and I turned back to Cowboy, who was squatting beside my chair and examining me. He was breathing heavily, and it was apparent that he hadn't had time to brush his teeth that morning. The worry in his face made him seem a lot younger than when I had first seen him. "Cowboy, can you help me get to the cafeteria for some water and food? I don't feel very well." It was only after I spoke that I realized what I had called him. Perhaps because of my near faint, he didn't seem to notice and allowed me to hang onto his arm all the way down the hallway. Moo pranced next to me and barked me along. I was too distracted to realize, until I was sitting down with water in one hand and a bowl of oatmeal in front of me, that Moo wasn't allowed in the cafeteria. He stood next to me, staring intensely at me, while Cowboy talked to a lady. As he spoke, he spotted something on the ground beside the food table. He trotted over to pick up his cowboy hat and placed it on his head with a satisfied smile before returning to the lady to explain her situation. "She almost passed out. I'm sure the health department would understand," he said. No excuses. I heard a dog earlier and you can't pull one over on me. Take that dog out of here. Already this morning, someone stole the special order I laid out, and now there's probably dog hair everywhere. Out! I gathered up the bowl and glass in my arms as best I could. "I will leave and bring these back in a minute, I promise." The woman crossed her arms and glared at me, but since she didn't protest, I followed Cowboy into the hallway. He tipped his hat at me and said goodbye before running down the hallway as if I was about to chase him. Chapter 5. I sat on a cement bench near the front door, chewing on the oatmeal. I appreciated the food, but it had the texture of wallpaper paste and about as much flavor. The sun was rapidly warming both the morning and my skin. My lightheaded episode had passed, but I experienced no sudden revelation about whether the accident had really been murder and who would be responsible if that were the case. The oatmeal was sticking to my ribs, and my gums for that matter. I ran my tongue over my teeth, then used my phone camera to see if I had anything stuck there. Sure enough, on my gum line around my canine teeth was evidence of not oatmeal, but the sticky icing from the donut I had had earlier. I had been so quick to shove it into my mouth that I had barely noticed the slightly grainy texture of the icing that had wedged itself in my teeth. Had anyone noticed? It looked as if I experienced the advanced stages of some kind of periodontal disease. I spent several minutes sucking on my teeth and rubbing my tongue over my teeth to clean up the mess. If this morning had taught me anything, it was that no sweet deed would go unpunished, and I swore off donuts forever. The front door opened, and Beanie popped out and looked around for a few seconds before spotting Moo and me. "You seen the rest of my team?" he asked as he approached. "No, but the van is still here, so they couldn't have gone far." He started to reach for the door to go back inside, then hesitated. "Hey, you're with the Wyoming team, right?" "We're the only team this weekend from Wyoming, so that must be us. I'm not the coach, though. I just help out." "I know. Your dog gave you away. You're Di, and that's Moo. You work at the training center." "Oh, yes, that's me." He rushed over, introducing himself and handing me a card. "I would really like it if you could put in a good word with Jess and everyone. I'm applying to be an on-site athlete there. My scores just aren't showing what a great athlete I really am. Maybe you can watch me a little at practice. You'll see." I stood and looked over his information as a way to buy a few seconds, deciding whether I could play a bit of hardball and use his eagerness to leverage out some truths he might otherwise hide. I could feel him leaning in and looking for my support. "Why aren't your scores higher? Injury?" I asked. "Oh, well, my coach just has a way. I can shoot and... Can I share something in private?" "Of course, it'll just be the three of us." I gestured to Moo before sitting down and patting the cement bench next to me. Jess, who selects the on-site athletes, and I were on our college archery team together, and I know she would want my input on a college athlete she was considering. I was glad the sky was clear so I wasn't smited by a lightning bolt for the gigantic lie I had just told. I doubted that I would have any influence on her decision, unless he was a killer, in which case she might be slightly curious about my opinion. He blew out a sigh and flopped down on the bench. "I picked the college because the coach was going to be hands-on. I actually really worked well with him the first year or so. I had a lot of bad habits and cheap equipment, and he really fixed that. But then things..." I resisted the urge to guess at all the way things could have gone. I didn't want to give him an option that sounded better than the truth. Finally, he finished picking his words and started talking again. "Every few months, right as I was getting used to the equipment, he'd want me to swap it out. He promised that once I got used to it, I would be even better. Then right when I was close to getting my scores back, he would do it again." "Couldn't you refuse to change?" "I was borrowing the school's equipment. I was on scholarships and money was tight. Since it was the team's equipment, it wasn't like I could take it from the range. He would pull the equipment off my setup and trade it with another archer's, or sell it and buy something new. He was doing that a lot. I don't know if he is stupid or evil. But then last summer I got a job in my own equipment, and I thought that would be the end of it." "What happened then?" "You have to understand that I have to be in the team to compete for the college, and I just know that I can win a medal at the University World event if I qualify. But these tournaments are awful. He hounds me the whole time, up in my face. I started asking him politely to back off, but he insists that as the coach, he is responsible for my behavior. He gets in my head, asking me if I always hesitate like that, or giving me a rundown on exactly my placement at the moment. It was too much. I can't focus while he's doing that." He had gotten more agitated over the course of his speech, and by the end his face was turning red. I had no doubt that if what he said was true, the coach had been undermining his ability to succeed. While my years of competing in college had been fun, it had been more of a social thing for me. But since moving to the training center for a nice restart of my life, I had learned more about competitive archery. High-level performance, coaching strategies, and the mental game were just dinner conversation, and breakfast conversation, and anytime conversation. When I wasn't working, I was shooting archery, talking archery, or thinking archery. What he was describing would be infuriating and detrimental to his performance, and the frustration of not being able to escape must have driven him crazy. If he changed colleges, he would lose time and possibly scholarships. He bounded up. "I need to find my team. If you see them, tell them I went to grab breakfast, and I'll see you later to watch me shoot." "Sure thing." I gave a wave goodbye before thinking of one last thing and calling out after him before he reached the door. "Hey, did you figure out the text message? The one you got but your friend said she didn't send?" "Funny how technology works. It was a glitch. I have the message on my phone, but when we looked at hers, there was nothing. Then we noticed that it matched the text from yesterday. It must have hung up and sent again this morning." "Funny that the message would work both days." "Yeah, what are the chances, eh? It was just my roommate's gone, come over, evergreen text, I suppose." He smiled as he opened the door and disappeared inside. Chapter 6. I wished I could have checked his phone, but I doubted I could figure out a way to do that subtly. Most people protected their phone like they're literal babies. Besides, what could I prove by looking at his phone? Text messages could be deleted, and at least on the surface, it wouldn't prove anything one way or the other. But I tucked the information into my brain in case I needed it in the future. I also had a clear picture of what their coach was like. Hopefully he would pull through, but perhaps he should consider a new career. I turned back to Moo to discover that in my moment of distraction, he had taken it upon himself to finish off my breakfast. Again. I picked up the dishes and went back inside to decide my next course of action. Should I call the police dispatch now and share my concerns? Would I sound credible? Surely not, I decided. I had no real evidence of anything, and I wasn't even sure if a crime had been committed yet. I was about to enter the dorm when I remembered the keys I had intended to clean earlier and had forgotten. I had left them under a bush near the front door, but when I went to look for them, they were gone. Hopefully the owner had gone to search for them and found them. I also hoped they had washed them off. I entered the dorm and headed down the hall toward the cafeteria. I could return the plates, then go for a 30-minute walk to explore the campus. I could scope out the archery field, assuming I found it, and clear my head. I was pretty sure Mary and her team would be asleep for at least a few more hours, but whenever they woke up, I would be on support staff duty. I could take pictures and videos to capture memories, and possibly to review after competition for training purposes. I would make sure that everyone had snacks, water, and a little bit of attention. While I could handle minor repairs, mostly I would let Bruce, who was the team coach and also my training center coworker, know, and he would handle everything. I could be the fun aunt. As I came down the hall, I spotted Braces approaching from the opposite direction. She stared at the ground in a way that I felt was more about avoiding eye contact than watching where she was going. She didn't want to be bothered, but unfortunately for her, I was going to break social protocol to dig for more dirt. "Hey, how is your coach?" I called out as she started to turn to enter the cafeteria ahead of me. She jerked her head up, either genuinely startled or doing a darn good acting job. "Oh, I don't know. I tried calling the hospital, but they mumbled something about HIPAA and privacy concerns and..." She choked up a little, and whatever she was going to say got caught in her chest. Genuine anguish washed across her face, and I felt like a real jerk for my flippant question. Perhaps I was becoming too used to death. "What are you going to do?" I asked. "I don't know. I guess talk with the rest of the team, catch them up, and then go over to the hospital. I have copies of all our paperwork from the team, and maybe something in there will prove that I have the right to find out something." "Maybe call your university. They might be able to help." "That's a good idea. Thanks." She perked up a little and gave me a small smile. Not really knowing what came over me other than the urge to help, I heard myself volunteering to help coach them. "If you guys need anything at the range, let me know. I'm sure your coach will be fine, but he will probably need to rest after he's released." I wasn't sure he would be fine, but it seemed the kind thing to say. Her smile grew a little. "That is really generous, thank you. I have already been helping coach a little bit, but it's hard to both compete and do any meaningful coaching, so I might just pull out of the tournament to help my teammates." "Oh, no," I countered. "Oh, it's okay. I'm only a middling competitor at best. After college, I'm probably going to try and get a position as a coach." The kitchen worker came out from behind the counter and raced over to me. "Here, I am so sorry I shouted at you earlier. They explained what happened. You're not the coach that's allergic to peanuts, are you?" She offered me another donut. "No, not me." "Here, these are my specialty. Very good." I hesitated slightly. I didn't really need a third donut for the day, but I didn't want to be rude. She offered it again. "It is very good. Take a bite." She gestured to Braces. "I saw you take one earlier this morning. It was good, yes?" Braces nodded. "Yes, I ate it before running out to get a coffee. Go on, you'll like it." "Take it." The cook pressed it closer to my face. "I'll take these dishes." With my hands empty of the used dishes, I took the donut. It did smell delicious. I said as I bit into the peanut butter goodness. After I chewed and swallowed, I gave a big smile, even as my stomach rolled a bit. "Thank you." Satisfied, the cook left me, and Braces headed for a table at which Cowboy and Beanie were already sitting. That meant that Glasses was somewhere alone. Chapter 7. I exited the back door and looked around. Our van was still there, which was good, considering I already had one mystery to solve, and I was quite sure that something foul was afoot. My gut said so, but also some pieces weren't adding up. I couldn't say how or why or prove whether it was murder or even attempted murder, but I knew something was up, and I was going to get to the bottom of it. I gave Moo the opportunity to sniff over the van while I trailed him, deep in thought. He dutifully marked the rear right tire as property of Moo in his doggy way, and when he pulled me around the building, I followed. As opposed to every other time we had gone along the same path from the back of the dormitory to the front, this time he pulled me around the other side. The morning was sunny, and as I enjoyed the warmth on my skin, I didn't even notice Glasses sitting on a bench with her eyes closed, her own face turned up to the sky. The glint of fresh tears on her cheek and a little sniffle told me all I needed to know. "Hey, are you okay?" I asked gently as I approached. She pretended to be startled, though I was pretty sure I had seen her sneak a peek at us when I first noticed her. "Oh, I didn't see you there. You caught me at my worst. She cut herself off dramatically, then took off her glasses to dab each eye. Despite the theatrics, she was genuinely crying. She held out her hand, palm up, to Moo, and he marched straight over to lay his head on it. She scratched around his ears. "What a wonderful dog. He can tell that I have a broken heart. I thought he loved me." She sobbed again, and Moo pressed against her chest so hard that she nearly tumbled over backwards before catching her balance. That gave me a few moments to gather my thoughts. My initial assumption was that she was overwhelmed with guilt or just upset about her coach's injury. But now I had to adjust my thinking to something far more common: dating troubles. "Problems with your boyfriend?" She snorted. "He said we were just having fun, and we broke up this morning." "Oh, wait, no. He said it wasn't a breakup because we were never together. Just that he wanted to clarify that while we were having a nice time right now, he will be going his own direction this summer and wish me all the best. That stupid text message this morning. I swear, everything would have been fine if he hadn't come over." "He mentioned that it was some glitch?" "He told you that? When did you even talk to him?" "I work at the Westmount Training Center for Competitive Shooting Sports, and he wanted to ask me a few questions. I guess it just came up." She nodded. "Yeah, that is one of the places he wants to apply. I guess it must have been a glitch, but nothing showed up on my phone, so I thought he was making it up at first. Then he came over this morning, and I thought it was so sweet that he would come over just to spend time with me. And I told him so. He thought I invited him over to make out and stuff, but I wasn't sure where my roommate was or when she would get back, so I figured that we could just talk about us. And boy, was that a mistake." She sniffled a bit more, and a tear dropped from her chin onto Moo's nose. He lifted his face to lick hers, and she squealed with delight, then disgust. "Were you together until the paramedics came?" "Yes. I had gotten dressed already because I didn't want to be sitting there in my pajamas. Anyways, the room I'm in is above where they parked, so I was watching when they rolled Coach out. Oh my gosh, I was so scared and ran down. I hope he's okay." "Do you like shooting on his team?" She shrugged. "I don't mind. I just compete because it's fun to get out and do something. Plus, I get a jersey and everything is paid for. But I don't want to be like a professional archer, whatever that means. And of course, the teacher's pet just loves him." She rolled her eyes. "So you mean your team member with the braces?" I asked. "That's her. She thinks she's the assistant coach and is always trying to coach me, but whatever. If she was so hot, she would already have a coaching job. I mean, she graduates soon, though it's really sad that she found Coach collapsed on the floor like that. That is going to mess her up. Speaking of which, I should go join them. I had hoped he would come talk to me, but I guess not." I followed her around the front door, thinking furiously. I realized that the he she had been referring to was Beanie, and I sighed. I remembered being young and feeling as if I was in a movie scene, crying on a bench when the young hero of the movie came out, saw the heroine's tears, and swept her into his arms to apologize and point out how beautiful she was when she cried. Of course, that had never happened to me when I was younger. If I cried outside, no one came to rescue me, and I ended up looking like a wet raccoon at best. I followed Glasses to the front where the rest of her team was exiting. Braces smiled at me. "Hey, we're heading over to check out the field. See you later." Cowboy was twirling the keys on the lanyard I had found earlier that day. He tossed them to Braces, who caught them and climbed in, then reached under the seat to pull up the adjusting lever. I gave them a wave and pulled my phone out of my pocket. I looked up the non-emergency number for the local police department. "Hi, I was wondering if you could send an officer over soon. This is kind of hard to explain over the phone, but I believe there's been a poisoning." Chapter 8. I stretched out on the grass of the archery field with Moo panting next to me. It had been a good weekend, despite the stressful beginning, and with all the shooting done, I could relax. The police had handled things so quickly and efficiently that I had been more or less done talking with them by the time Mary and the team woke up on that fateful morning. After the team woke up, we were busy nonstop. My intention to just get snacks and water was quickly replaced by my job as the emotional counselor to the team, personal videographer, and most importantly, Mary's private coach. She didn't really need me, but she was shooting scores that she was proud of. Just managing her emotional energy level was almost more than she could handle. It was weird. I had expected that given her experience, a collegiate tournament would be a piece of cake. But her high expectations were combined with the fact that she felt she needed to be the perfect role model for the rest of the team who looked up to her. Not that anyone other than me could tell how stressed she was. We were roommates and the closest of friends, and she trusted me to hear what was going through her head. It was a lot. So every waking moment had been busy for me, but finally I could rest. Mary had won the gold medal after setting a new collegiate record. The award ceremony would be in 30 minutes. Then, after we thanked the hosting team and the field crew, we would pack up the vans and drive back to the center. It would be a long drive, but Mary asked if she could ride back with me, so at least this time I wouldn't be alone with Moo. He was a great travel buddy, but he let the conversation lag on his end. I was on the edge of sleep when Mary flopped down next to me. "Thanks for everything this weekend." I sat up and blinked in the bright sunlight. "Anytime." "No, not anytime. I normally hold it together a lot better, but I really needed some help this weekend, and you were my personal cheerleader. But now that the tournament is over, tell me everything. Thank you for waiting to tell me about it." I yawned. "I would have hated to bore you with a little thing like attempted murder." She rolled her eyes. "You know that is exactly the opposite of how I feel. I would have been so distracted thinking about it that I couldn't have focused on archery." "I'm just teasing. It wasn't too big of a deal. I just figured out who did it and told the cops what I had seen." I don't think he believed me, but with all the students gone from school, things were slow, and he decided to go to the hospital and follow up with the coach. Coach Jackson or Johnson or Erickson is still in the hospital, but is going to pull through. "So the coach is going to be okay?" "Yes, but I think he might take up a different career. He stopped by yesterday to thank me before he hopped on a flight home. He thought the kitchen screwed up. He had gotten a bag of food from the kitchen that was specifically marked for him and was not supposed to contain peanuts. He opened the bag, grabbed the donut, and instantly knew it was a mistake and spit it back in the bag. He was ready to sue the university and the cafeteria. But after I spoke to the police officer, he was interested enough in my story to visit the coach in the hospital. Given what I had told the officer, they were able to piece together what happened. The officer came back to talk to me again, but before I could even say anything, the jig was up." "Why?" "Because when I was explaining to the officer, I didn't notice the team had come back and overheard me. Braces, that's what I was calling her, broke down in tears saying she didn't do it on purpose, which is a lie, and she thought he would only need to take off for the weekend, not end up in the hospital." "Wow, and how did you know it was her?" "The first thing I noticed was that she said she had eaten a peanut butter flavored donut. I ate 2 of those, and both times I got so much of the frosting stuck in my teeth that I needed to brush. And she had braces. Everything gets in those. I was just idly thinking about it, and according to her, she grabbed a donut that morning and hopped in the van to go grab coffee. I ran into her later outside her van, and we discovered her coach together, so theoretically she couldn't have done it. Except, Mary prompted me to continue, except that I never actually saw her get out of the van. She said she had gotten back, but later, when she got into the van, she needed to adjust the seat. Plus, there were the missing keys. She used a set of keys that I knew had been missing that morning. I even gave them a sniff to confirm they were the same set. A sniff? What are you talking about? That morning, before all the excitement with the paramedics, I found a set of keys on the ground that Moo had pooped on the lanyard of. I meant to clean them up and left them at the front door, then later they went missing. Moo must have pooped on them the previous night, so I know they were out there all night and morning. So she couldn't have left to go get coffee like she insisted. So I thought to myself, why would she make such a big deal out of being gone if she didn't know he was dead? And the donut? She gave it to him, put it in the bag of food, then left. She planned to be gone when he was discovered, but then realized she didn't have her keys. So I guess she hung around until someone came by and could act as a witness. Her team was likely not going to come down for a while. Why not? Did she arrange that too? The one I called Cowboy will sleep till noon if they let him, and Glasses and Beanie had a thing going on. So Braces got up, texted Beanie from Glasses' phone, then deleted it. She knew Glasses was head over heels in love and wouldn't question him coming over. But if she saw the text on her phone, she would know someone else had sent it. Anyways, they were having a defining the relationship talk that would last for hours, and Cowboy would sleep till noon. With them occupied, Braces switched the donuts and left. But for a while, I thought it could be Cowboy who had gotten the donut because his hat was in the cafeteria while he claimed he slept in. But I guess it wasn't him that put it there? When I saw it, it was resting on the brim, right side up. You know that can distort the brim. Real cowboys always put the hat upside down, resting it on the crown, so it seemed that someone put it there on purpose, and that person wasn't him. That does sound like a murder plot, not a little inconvenience to the coach. I know. I think Braces meant to do her coach in permanently. She disposed of the bag of food. I vaguely remember it being there when I found the body, but when I came back later, it was gone. The police found it in the 9th floor unlocked bedroom, hiding in the closet. And sure enough, the partial donut was there, though it doesn't matter as much since he lived. He can testify that she gave him the bag of food. Shouting from the far side of the field caught my attention, and I stood up, stretching and groaning to work out all the kinks in my back. Then I turned and offered a hand to Mary. Come on, Mary, it's time for you to get your medal. Mary stood up and gave me a quick hug. Have I told you how much I appreciate you? I hugged her back. You can't ever tell me enough. Come on, Moo, it's time to cheer. He lifted his nose to the sky and let out a long, woo-woo. The end. Death in the Dormitory, Target Practice Mini Mystery. For more information about Nikki Haverstock or her books, please go to nikkihaverstock.com.